Kicks off. Okay, great. Okay, everybody, we'll call the meeting to order then, and we'll turn it right over to Jody Clifford.
Okay, so we'll get started. We have a sort of different approach than our engagements and so forth. So we'll explain that in a bit. This is going to be, we're very excited. This is a very exciting plan. We're coming to the end of it. This is still in the draft form, which you'll see tonight. But before we kick it off, I know that a few people want to say a few words. So first, I think I'll turn it over to the city manager, Mr. Trail.
Thank you, Jody. I almost didn't recognize you.
I know. It's weird, eh?
It's really weird when you come home and your girlfriend doesn't recognize you.
It's a newer, younger Jody Clifford. No, thank you, Jody. So I'll just say a few comments. I won't be very long. I think there are a couple of slides at the front end of this deck. Just, I guess, to highlight that, as Jody said, you know, this is a big project. This was sort of one of the major elements of the work plan and also the council priorities. And I'm just going to walk you through where this ties into council priorities as a bit of a reminder. First and foremost, there's a commitment here around density. And so if you look under growth and prosperity, we were seeking to drive development in accordance with Plan SJ that creates density and efficient infrastructure and services. And so that's one of the primary drivers around this neighborhood plan. There's nowhere in the community that would have higher density today and nowhere where we would get better return on investment. Secondly, there's a commitment to develop neighborhoods, and more specifically to look at the elements of public and active transportation. Again, a great opportunity on the peninsula because of that density and proximity to commercial areas and shopping and entertainment. Also street beautification, modernizing of the heritage aspects, and also improvement on parks and green space investment. So those elements will be, hopefully you will see those in the draft products that you get exposed to here today. Highlighting here strategic road improvements that ties into how people get around on the peninsula. So that'll be highlighted, as well as aligning our capital investment with service objectives. So all of this is going to take money. I would say, in a word, this plan will be very aspirational. It will be something that will be a guiding document for a lengthy period of time. I think we need to set expectations that we will not be able to afford to implement all of the elements of this instantly. So this will be something that survives over a period of time. So it's a vision of what would the peninsula look like in the future. And we may be 20 years down the road before it's all realized, perhaps even a little longer. But it's also balanced, I think, in terms of achievability. So what you'll see in the drafts, obviously, are a result of a lot of consultation, a lot of input, with a measure of I think ambition. So what could it be? So it's very aspirational, but it's also measured in a sense that it probably can be done. And so really what we're trying to do is reimagine what we want from this neighborhood. And I think, through my own experience, we have a lot of isolated conversations. People have ideas. Why don't we do this with this particular property? Why don't we do that with this property? This is an attempt to bring it all together into a single document that takes in all those inputs, all those perspectives, and has tried to come up with the best of all of those inputs. And I think hopefully you'll be as excited as this team is. I know the guy to my left has been working on this pretty much non-stop now for months, and I know the team is very excited about the draft product, and hopefully we can get your input through this workshop and also improve upon it and have it something that the rest of the community will be excited and will embrace and go forward in terms of implementation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Jeff mentioned that we're hoping to get, we're hoping to get your feedback today. I'm just going to rephrase that a bit to say that we are going to get your feedback today because we're going to micromanage that. That's the whole point of the session, so we look forward to that. Before we do that, though, I think Jack will want to say a few words.
So I just wanted to touch just briefly on your role tonight and as this process moves forward. Just a bit of a recap for council on why the Central Peninsula Neighbourhood Plan was prioritized, and then just talk a bit about the high level of the process moving forward. So obviously we're excited to be here to share the initial plan, neighborhood plan with you this evening, and to give an opportunity for your first review of this document. I mean, council has certainly played an important role throughout this process. First of all, setting it as a priority, securing the resources to make it happen, and will play an important role as this rolls out. As a starting point, tonight we're looking for your initial feedback on the draft plan. We're looking for your, I guess, what is important to you about it, what are the burning questions that you have, and what is your level of comfort with the materials as you move forward in the process. We're also looking, as we start to roll this out to the community, for council to be an important ambassador for the plan. You set this as a priority for your term. As you connect with the community and key stakeholders, it's important to position you as community ambassadors of the plan. And obviously council will have a significant role not only in the adoption of the plan, it is a legislative document, but also in the implementation of it. So you will be responsible to ensure that it is upheld in future decision making in terms of setting priorities for capital and operating budgets, and to ensure that the organization reflects it in its various initiatives. Next slide. Just a bit of a recap for council on the prioritization of the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan. So as really the economic and cultural heart of not only the city but really the entire region, it's really an important part of the city's value proposition. It sets us apart and really is our niche market, if you will, and that makes the city attractive for growth. Targeting growth, as Jeff mentioned, in this area promotes urban density and sustainability. It also provides the biggest bang for the city's buck in terms of our investments. It capitalizes on those investments that have already been made in infrastructure in the core area of the city. Next slide, Jody. And just as a recap, council set the priority around the Central Peninsula, and it was based on a solid evidence-based approach to looking at all of its urban neighborhoods, and it reflects really the role that the Central Peninsula plays in terms of benefiting the city as a whole. And I think it's important to note that as we continue the momentum in terms of the adoption and implementation, it will serve as a template really for how do we roll out neighborhood plans in other neighborhoods like the North End and the Lower West Side. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the significant community and staff effort that's gone into the making of this plan. We have our core project team assembled here tonight in terms of the staff that have been engaged, and I just assure you that we've capitalized on the expertise and local knowledge of our team, as well as best practices in terms of our consultant team that played a role in this, and we're bringing the innovation combined with that's a powerful combination, the innovation combined with the local knowledge to bring this package before you this evening. I also wanted to acknowledge that there are significant members in terms of members of committees of council that have had a hand and will continue to have a hand in the shaping of many of the technical aspects of these documents. So it's certainly been through the Heritage Board and will continue to be going through those groups, as well as the City's Planning Advisory Committee, and they will play a formal role in the process. And last but not least, I'd like to acknowledge really the significant effort of the city's neighborhood action team, which is that appointed 10-member citizen-based committee that has really worked closely with staff as community ambassadors of the neighborhood plan, and they have ensured that this is a bold and an aspirational plan, but it also reflects the community's vision. And I'd like to now turn it over to Councillors Reardon and Lowe, who are your two council representatives on the Neighbourhood Action Team, to provide some remarks on behalf of the committee.
Well, I guess Jerry and I have been grateful to be part of the team, and it has been an exciting process to be involved in. And for me personally, when I moved here in '80, and then we went back to Halifax. Ed was doing his residency. When we moved back in '84, already there was some decimation had started. The general hospital was gone, and from then on there's been poaching from the uptown area without any strategy to maintain the uptown area to other areas. So as they developed, you know, East Point, etc. So for me personally, it's really exciting to see this pivotal turn now as we focus on this and we come up with strategies of how do we bring people back into it. It's happening now already, and for investors, when you see the city come out with an actual, tangible, understandable, you know, reasonable plan, it makes investing a lot more secure, I think, for them. And the other thing that's really exciting about this is that we have all these groups that we'll now be dialoguing with. So I think historically, a lot of the groups have worked in the uptown area, but in silos. So now we'll work with Uptown St. John, and we'll work with and get some feedback from them in the port, and the Community Arts Board, and all sorts of different things. So we'll have that dialogue going on, which I think is so important, because some things are happening, and we can build on them, and some of the things we want to do, you know, people can support us with that as well. So it's really been great, and so I'm a big, of course, supporter of it, and Jerry's on the team as well. So I'll turn it over to Jerry for a few words. Jerry.
Anyways, yeah, I'm from the South End. I lived my first 27 years down there. I know it inside out, outside in. I think this is a great plan. I think in 20, 25 years from now, you won't recognize the South End, because I think the condos are going to go south and the apartments are going to come up, and they're going to meet somewhere around, say, Duke Street, along there somewhere. Like right now we have Kavanaugh doing over the selling end. We got 2 lots I see have been sold signs on them. We got a building on Union Street sold. So I think because of this plan started, and the involvement in the community people, and the press, I said, people are starting to take a big interest in the South End. Like, we don't have enough product now for people to come in from Quispam and in from Grand Bay to live in the upper part. I consider the South End like 2 different areas. I consider uptown down as far as, say, Orange Street, and then from Orange Street right down to Tin Can Beach. I think the apartments will be built from, say, Duke Street, Orange Street downward to Tin Can Beach, and condos will be built from there up. And this is something that you're going to show people, you know, how to do and what to buy and what not to buy and how to do it. Like, I think we need incentives to help, especially the apartment areas lower down, right? And like, it's not going to happen overnight. Like right now in the South End, we probably have 2 or 3 bad blocks, and in order to change it, somebody's got to come in and do a house, and then the house next door will get done, the one across the street will get done, and it'll spread. But until that happens, we'll still have those 2 or 3 bad blocks. But things are going back to the way it was years ago, and the biggest thing is we need the school. The school, the school will be built in the South End, and it'll be built somewhere around St. James Street, along there, the main corridor, and that there will. Then the apartments will pop everywhere, and people will come here. I mean, we got 1,000 people working in Irvin's building uptown, and to be able to walk up the hill to the South End, I think it's great. So I think this is moving in the right direction. I think that the committee has to push the government for the school, because the school is the nucleus of the whole thing. And as things go, without the school, there's going to be no churches down there. Like, the churches are falling left and right, so it has to be up to the school and what's inside the school to make it feel like a community. But with Donna, like Donna lives there now, and actually on the committee, actually really, you're half living there, Jody, like Paddock Street, you're close, your mom lives there. The chairperson lives in the South End. 2 of the people on the committee live in the South End, so it's really a South End oriented committee. And you know, to me, usually I'm going the opposite way. But anyways, I think this is great. But the key is the school. Done.
Thanks. Thanks,
Quiet and
Councillor.
peaceful. Wasn't bad.
It was,
Thought it was good.
Well, good like it wasn't bad.
yeah, thank you, Councillor. That was the neighborhood action team. I couldn't really understate the value they play in your process. We've had these types of planning policy documents in the past where you've integrated volunteers from the neighborhood and community to get involved, and they're always effective, but especially this time around, you can see the fingerprints of the neighborhood action team all over this plan. It's at the ground level, this plan, so it's really got a lot of integration from what the community told us, but also the action team, which really provided great input and a great sounding board for staff as we started to design and construct this plan. The two councillors were on that team, but there was also other community members that were also there that they did a fabulous job. So shout out to them, fantastic job. But now we want to get into the presentation and workshop portion of this evening. So it's a bit of a unique one, and I think to walk us through the workshop component, Phil would like to say a few words. Phil.
So our challenge today is if you want to, the goal is, as you heard, we certainly want to provide an overview and a brief. So that's a key objective. Do you understand this stuff? But also we want to make sure that we solicit feedback. So we had to create some sort of mechanism to do that instead of just saying, so, what do you think? So this is what we're proposing today, is a mechanism to do that. And part of it is, again, you just have to trust us. It's going to work. We know it's going to work, but that's why there's these specific arts and crafts related materials in front of you. It's not too complex, and I'm going to share with you how we do that. So what we're looking for is, as a staff, is saying, do you understand this? Where are you not understanding? Where is it not catching? I don't get it. Why are you doing it that way? Also, where are the areas that are resonating less? I don't get why you're doing that. Or I'm really excited about that. So, if you continue going on, Jody.
Oh, sorry.
We will have a roundtable opportunity. Every single person will be asked to provide general commentary, but before we get there, we have 2 hours, and we will do this in 2 hours. We will ask you 2 types of questions regularly throughout this session, and I'm going to get to that. And there's 3 categories of specific feedback, and you'll see that in a sec. And then there's also these 3 colors that you have. So why don't you get to the agenda, and I'll just go through it really quick. And if you hit the next button again. Okay, so we're finishing off number 3. We're doing very well so far, striking off the first 3. The presentation will go through some context. There will be no questions related to that, but we will go into vision and big moves. And after that section, what we're going to ask you to do is, during the section, when Jody's presenting, anything in this color, we want you to write what is really important, or what is really exciting about this section. We want you to write it down. And it can happen anytime, so just have it right in front of you and say, I like that, write it down. And at the end of that session, we're going to ask you to post it on that particular area. So you can see here, vision and big moves. There's that section right there that says, what are you excited about? So that is the yellow. Now, you also have another sticky, which is, what's your questions? Or what's your big questions? You just write them down, and you will be given at the end of that section a little bit of time to write out your ideas if you haven't written it during the session, and then you're going to follow it. Then, what we're going to do is you have these 3 colors. Yellow, red, and green. And what we're going to do before we go through the questions, we're going to say, how many of you are comfortable with this section? If you're really comfortable with this section, just hit green. And then we're going to log it. We're going to say, wow, that section, people are generally comfortable with that. If you're in the middle, you got some concern, but generally it works, yellow.
Like soccer.
And then red is, I'm confused, don't get it, don't know what's going on here, I need some help. That's really important because we could create a whole other session, right, on one particular area if we have to dive into it. We don't know what those are yet, so I know it seems a little trivial, but if you just trust us on this, we'll get that data and we'll go through it. Then we'll answer the questions that you have as well during that section. What happens is if we ask a whole bunch of substantive questions throughout this, we're just not going to get through the quantity of material that we got to get through today. So that's where you got to trust us. Now, you can ask questions during any time, and there'll be two types of questions. Easy questions and not easy questions. Easy questions, we'll answer them right away. Not easy questions, we're going to write them down on the board and we're going to deal with them later, because it will be too disruptive to the meeting if we just ask substantive questions left and right the entire time. We just won't get to the substance of it. And if I know group dynamics, some of those answers will come later on in the presentation if we just wait it out. We'll be doing that for 3 sections. The big move section, the vision big moves, the design guidelines, and then the implementation. Then the last section will go through what we're doing to engage the general public with this draft as we go forward, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions on that. Then, this is where it gets really exciting. You're going to have this filled with little stickies, right? All over the place. We're going to give you 5 minutes before you do your round table. Each person will have that time to talk about what you like, what you don't like generally, not just the sections. You can walk around and take a look at what you wrote, what other people wrote, remind you of the sections that, oh, that looks pretty good, yeah, I remember that, and then you can make your comments. It'll help you remind you, because again, there's a lot of content here. You might end up focusing on one thing when there's a lot of things we talked about during the session. So, that's it. During the entire time, we're also going to be populating a Q&A that we'll be submitting out to the public. So, a great way to get that Q&A populated is this group here. If you have a great question, we'll put that in the Q&A, we'll get a good answer for it, we'll substantiate it, and we'll release it out to the public. Because if you're asking it, there's probably others in the public that are asking that same question. So, that's it. That's how we're going to try to get through this session. And Jody's ready to go.
Okay. So to say that we've done a lot of this sort of stuff in planning over the years. I've never seen anybody as animated and excited about stickies as Phil. So when we get to that, he's really going to help play a key role, because not that we really need him to do it, he just really wants to get the stickies on that board. So
Get those stickies on it.
All right, thanks, Phil. Okay, so let's get down to it. I'm going to give an overview, a presentation of material. Hopefully a lot of this will be clear after we go through it together, but as Phil said, you'll have an opportunity to go through it if it's not, and we'll definitely do our best to clarify and address any questions and concerns you have. So first of all, context, where are we at? You all know this information, but we're going to just do this by way of reminder. The community, since probably 40, 50 years ago, has experienced decline for a number of reasons, from suburban sprawl. The area of the country has lost a lot of population, but especially the Central Peninsula from the mid-80s to the last census. There's been a steady decline in population in the four neighborhoods. With the exception of the last census, we saw actually an increase in the uptown area. We'll get to that. That's kind of an interesting feature, because in the St. John City, population has decreased almost across the board. But one caveat of interesting note is that this area experienced growth. So that's interesting and it's encouraging. The areas around that one cohort, really, these numbers are just really stability. They're not significant in either direction. And the areas at the opposite ends experience significant decline. So we want to reverse this trend, keep the stability going in the central, and help grow that and help grow the population and tax base at the same time. Part of our opportunity to do that, we think, this you can see this profile of what our demographic looks like in the Central Peninsula. There's this cohort at the bottom end of it, which is our youth, which is at the slimmest part, pretty much, of the pyramid. And with the new school being built, as I believe Jerry mentioned, the opportunity to grow that part of the population is significant over time. But also on the left-hand side, you see this. You've seen this map before. This is vacancy where it occurs in the Central Peninsula. This could be vacant lots. It could be surface-level parking lots. This image is maybe a year and a half old or so there might be a bit of change, but it still reflects a general trend that's been existing in our community for a while. Although that's not necessarily ideal, it does present, the vacancy does present opportunity for growth and reinvestment. So that's what the plan sort of envisions for this. Let's figure out how to stymie decline, stabilize our communities, and rebuild where there's opportunity to do that. And those opportunities are identified in the plan in some of these keynote areas in those neighborhoods. These areas have experienced decline and or through urban renewal process 40, 50 years ago were rebuilt in a fashion that was more permissible to the movement of automobiles, not people. So how do we refocus these neighborhoods and integrate them and redevelop them in ways that are sensitive to pedestrians and communities. Okay, so the process of the plan, as you know, in spring of 2017, we launched the plan. We began early dialogue with the community and our consultants, how to focus on the plan. In the spring and summer months, we did a bit of analysis, looking at best practices, reviewing what we'd heard up until that point, which carried on into the early fall, and then in the wintertime and fall, we started to do a visioning process to put together this information and look at what can this community look like over time. And we vetted that back to the community and have come up with what is in front of you today as a draft plan. In the spirit and culture of Plan SJ, if you recall, it was rich in our engagement process, which was a first for our community at that time. And that culture is carried forward in all of our planning processes, and this is no exception. We've had great community feedback. I think this time around we did a much better job at online feedback, which might have been the one weak heel we had with Plan SJ. But it's been a robust engagement process, and we think we've really gotten a lot out of it. The context of this plan comes from, basically, I just want to situate this in a family of efforts we've had since 2012 when we adopted Plan SJ. I like to think of it as Plan SJ is that mothership document. It sort of sets the large ship, which is our organization, in a direction. And all the other plans that come out of that plan, that master plan, drive it forward. They propel it. They're operational. Or they're visionary at the neighborhood level. For example, we did the zoning bylaw, updated that, as you're aware. So that now reflects modern standards for development. There's a building bylaw that was updated, subdivision bylaw was updated, and a drainage bylaw that was updated. At the same time, we had key strategies to help, from a policy perspective, envision our neighborhoods. One is Move SJ, and that's in its, I think, coming toward the end of phase 2 in a 3-phase process. We have the neighborhood plan, which is before you today. It's the first of what would, in the future, be 3 or 4 neighborhood plans at the very least. And Play SJ, which is our Park and Rec master document, which was completed a couple of years ago. All of these envisioning the guidance of Plan SJ, how to see, I guess, a more sustainable, smart growth future for our city. At the same time, we have process improvements, and these improvements came from how do developers get through our processes in effective, predictable, and clear fashion so they can invest their money in our community and feel satisfied with the process they've gone through. And at the same time, continuous improvement exercises within City Hall to make sure that we're offering the best service and capturing the best value we can with our time. And that's ongoing, by the way. Growth agenda at the same time has been trying to grow our tax base and grow our population base. That's through the population growth framework. The roadmap to smart growth is a policy document that was adopted earlier this year. And the property matching program, which is coming forward in the near future, hopefully, which is it's a design to try to really match people up with properties that are vacant or vacant lots to try to drive growth. On top of that, we have our operational enforcement efforts to try to beautify our city. One is the unsightly premises, which has an accelerated program in the Central Peninsula, as well as the dangerous and vacant properties program, which is accelerated in the Central Peninsula. And you recall the illegal parking lots, which is a file that was completed last year, which looked at modernizing the standards for parking lots and ensuring that all the parking lots that exist in the peninsula are up to that standard. At the same time, more on the carrot side of the equation, we have mechanisms in place to help provide a little bit of financial benefit to people who want to invest for residential growth in our community in the Central Peninsula, and a beautification program for those who live in the Central Peninsula outside of the heritage area that wanted to invest in the facades of their building. And that is complemented, of course, by the Heritage Program, which has existed for many years and has been very successful, in providing grants to people that live inside the heritage area. So part 2, vision and big moves. So these are the sort of catalytic moves that are projected for the plan in the 3 different neighborhoods that will bring about the highest degree of change. Guiding these decisions are the vision for the plan, which tries to focus on a pedestrian-oriented public realm and mixed-use developments And the last sentence of the vision really captures what the plan is trying to achieve very well, I think. As the city of St. John continues to grow, the Central Peninsula will emerge as a reinvigorated heart of the city and set itself firmly at the top of places to live in the Maritimes. So it's ambitious, but it's very much achievable. And that's what we hope to achieve with this. And the principles that help sort of take that vision forward are, again, they reinforce the need for a high-quality, pedestrian-friendly environment, the beautification of our public realm, set the course of growth that aligns the city's roadmap for smart growth, and so on. And the context of where we're at now. So today we have about 5,500 units, residential units in the Central Peninsula, and that's about 7,500 residents. We have 1,100 businesses and about 14,000 jobs. We have about $910 million in tax base. Where we'd like to be, well, we'd like to have 1,500 new residential units and 3,000 new residents, which is approximately a 40% increase. 350 new businesses and 4,000 additional jobs, which would be 38%, and $350 million new dollars in tax base, which would put us well over $1 billion. So how's that going to happen? Where's this investment going to occur? We're going to go through each one of these 4 areas that are contemplated in for the plan. Designing that building to make sure it meets a community standard that helps build out the adjacent areas of the waterfront. King Square, obviously very important historical green space in the uptown. There's a good number of buildings that have been there for years that are very nice architectural detail buildings. There's also opportunity for infill development in some of the areas that are either vacant or have vacant buildings. Another early indicator of success is the recent purchase, I think, of 91 King Street, so we look forward to seeing what the concepts are for that. But there's also other areas of opportunity around King Square, as well as the Irving headquarters, which is nearing completion. This area, or an early concept piece, perhaps, for this part of the community would be to wrap a harbor passage through the Coast Guard site, giving a little bit of access to proximity to the waterfront for the public, and also contemplating how the Loyalist Plaza area, Market Square area, could be used for more large gatherings of people, more flexible urban space. And there's concepts for the plaza itself, and how could we greenscape this surface and to provide a little relief to the hard surfacing that would maybe capture more of the imagination and attention of people who might want to spend more leisure time in and around that area. Looking at the south end, this is also an area that's received a little bit of attention and reinvestment recently. The plan, just to situate you here, this is St. James Street. The plan identifies that as an important east-west corridor linking the South Peninsula. Sydney Street, coming down on the eastern bank of Queen Square and Rainbow Park, and Charlotte Street, likewise on the west side. And Rainbow Park, this is an important part of this area of the plan. It's a great green space. It's really well utilized in the areas that are developed, but it also is unfinished, and the plan contemplates finishing that and looking at opportunities for infill around it. Queen Square, arguably one of the nicest green spaces in the area. There's great street walls on all sides of it, but there is opportunity for infill in some of the areas that are currently vacant. And the plan also contemplates opening up Germain Street where it meets with Lower Cove Loop, Broad Street, and helping traffic flow, pedestrian flow into the Germain Street corridor. So what would that look like? A lot of the plan, you'll notice in the green spaces when you read it, green spaces are sort of meant to be vibrant, they're meant to be safe and well utilized. And one way to help do that is to have is to frame your green spaces with residential uses. In this case, this is sort of a contemplation of townhouses that would frame both those squares. There's also the direction have urban furniture, park furniture that would be utilized and popular with people who frequent those areas. This is an example. The splash pad is highly utilized. The community loves it, but there's opportunities for other types of integrated uses. And again, the Rainbow Park plan, it's early concept was great, but it's now 10 years old. So maybe there's an opportunity here to go back to the public and ask them what do we want to see with this, the remainder of the square, and how should we invest in this to make it the best and highest use of the community. As Councillor mentioned, the school, the K-8 school is planned for the south end. This investment that should be leveraged to ensure that the greatest benefit is realized by the community. So when we know where that's going to go, then the plan calls for investment on our end to make sure the highest impact is realized. South waterfront, this area is a little more further into the future in imagining the outcomes. The situation, there's Broad Street, Tin Can Beach is envisioned as a little more developed and interconnected. Old sugar refinery site, there's some contamination problems and issues in this part of the southern peninsula, but a casual use like perhaps an event space or so forth could be used without much need to fix the contamination. And the Army Barracks, that's contemplated, again, it's a farther into the future use, because it's certainly not owned by the city at this point, but the community does see a desire to have that as perhaps a community space, promoting arts and culture and so forth. This is sort of an example of the exhibition grounds or fairgrounds that could be utilized for the sugar refinery site. It's a great interim use and sort of passive recreational use of the green spaces in and around the Army Barracks. So some of this is city land, some of this is provincial land, but we could integrate this well without too much cost. Waterloo Village, again, this is probably most of the items here are probably further along in the planning period. And that horizon, this is Waterloo Street, Crown Street, and Union Street. The plan, again, looks at the critical green space of this neighborhood being Challen Field, and contemplates some infill townhouse units and development along the western bank, southwestern bank. Would tighten up the space a little bit, but create a higher quality space for the community. Marsh Creek, now with harbor cleanup finished, the plan sort of contemplates, as a Plan SJ, perhaps the more public integrated recreational walking path, what have you, through that space. So what that look like? Well, the Union Street, the corridor, where we've seen a lot of recent interest in investment, which is great, while the plan contemplates more of that, mixed-use buildings that frame the street well, and Union Street itself, the plan sort of positions it as a corridor that doesn't act as a barrier any longer to Waterloo Village from the uptown, but more of a porous street that connects those two communities in different fashions and helps integrate live-use buildings. This is a look at the Challen Field sort of concept. Again, townhouses, framing a green space, helping front the Challen Field, and providing more of a diversity of housing choice. For Crown Street, the corridor is currently overbuilt in its existing fashion. It's obviously a car-oriented corridor designed during the urban renewal era when that type of transportation choice was dominant. Now we're sort of trying to refocus and reposition these types of corridors, give them some road diets, integrate some pedestrian uses and transit uses. And the question really is, what could Crown Street look like in a 30-year horizon? And is this something that the community is ready for, and how do we integrate this type of vision? And this is an example of a type of vision that, and I think this was done by ACAP, Community Environmental Partners, in trying to see a future for Marsh Creek that's no longer negative as the historic association with that space has been. But now with harbor cleanup, there's all kinds of opportunity for this to be an area that people go to enjoy nature. And it is, as I'm told, a bit of a bird sanctuary for a number of species that use Marsh Creek annually. Long Wharf, again, this is a longer-term vision. Mixed-use developments are contemplated to plan connecting pedestrians to the uptown through a pedestrian bridge that would link over the slip and connect eventually down to the Fort Latour green space. And the concerns and points of interest we have to really contemplate with this is making sure we integrate port use. This is port space, the cruise ships still use this, and we can't ignore that. That's very important in the build out of this site. And it still is port land, so this definitely is something that is longer term. So we kind of went through that quickly. It's all in your documents. We just want to take a minute here, and as Phil mentioned earlier, let's see your comfort levels. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? Something you don't understand? We're gonna take note of your colors. So let's put your cards up. Green, you get it, understand it, you're comfortable with it. It's great. Yellow, a little bit of hesitation there. Red, hold on. So. Sorry, Ken, it was yeah, I guess you went to the room we went through that. It's,
Got the teacher.
it's an elementary school teacher. Click on the update.
I'm a little yellow on this.
Okay.
If you're not green, who in the room should be green?
You got your cards up? Yeah, Terry, you got it.
Yeah, right here, bud.
Hold it up. Our team needs to see it. Okay, so we want to just do just quick write down what's important to you. You have the stickies that Phil's provided, and are there any burning questions? So we want to do this in these stages while the material is fresh in your head.
So what are we excited about, you mean, Jody, or what's important?
Yeah, so it's yeah, what's exciting? Yeah, what you're excited about? Same thing.
Tax base.
And you're going to stick those on the board when you're done.
She didn't get to use hers first.
I was filming a video on a farm all day, so farm else and farm. So I apologize.
No, I thought it was my client.
David feels better. He thought it was him.
No, it's just permeating my hair and clothing. I apologize.
Okay, it's all good. You're good, you're good. We'll have her back. Yeah, you're getting better.
You want us just to go up and put them
Yeah,
in?
if you, whenever you're ready.
Take mine, Shirley, with you.
What color do you want, Phil, for?
Are you ready, Jerry?
Green or yellow is excited, and red is your burning question.
Green's good.
Green, good. Red is burning question.
Did you ready?
And you want us to put those up there now?
Yeah, this slot right here.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah. This is the.
No, I just.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
We're good. I'm real good on it.
So am I.
I need it all for my coach here and things. Burning question. Got a match?
You could have more than one.
Question is, you get someone put two.
Yes. Last Friday? Saturday. No, I don't. I didn't really notice what time it was.
I'll give you a call.
Looks good.
Yeah. Should use a bigger board.
Did you do a lot today? Did you have a good day?
That's for an hour and a half.
Did they answer the door?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of people are.
I think get what, 50%?
Oh, no, not yet. No, you might get 30%.
Categorize?
Sorry.
Duplicate to similar, yeah.
Ray, Street,
Well, Ray's making me feel bad. He's so slim and sexy now. Hey, look good on Saturday night. Debbie said, holy, Ray was like,
Is the new shoes?
no, the whole gig, like, yeah. I got lazy, I was there like,
I was thinking about after summer's over, probably October. For the midway point.
They're not too many.
Just to say, you know, one did it once. 4 years ago right now. First. And I didn't do nearly, I put in 500 or 700 doors. The collection was taking place, right? So I'm mixing up issues. And then I threw out the door and then I'm running for the oh yeah. Yeah, I just gonna probably in October after back to school settles down. We'll get into just do it before winter's going. Oh yeah. Good, no, just something small and simple. Might get nobody might get something. I just don't like being seen as the only time I'm out here. I remember you.
they're first.
Maybe you did like 7
What's your name? We did a bunch of stuff Saturday, and just a couple of drop-ins. Yeah, the crowd was incredible. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. There must have been a couple hundred people.
Okay, guys, that was a very successful stickering process. Congratulations.
I didn't.
Just reviewing, we're going to get back to all the questions and concerns that you have, but we're just going to do a quick overview and then we can keep on moving on with the presentation. But there seems to be a lot of support for some of the more transformational type investments, as well as the sugar refinery site. The concept of Marsh Creek being a green space was popular. Expansion of Harbor Passage is popular, so those are all great things. There's a lot of right here too, sort of questions, and we can answer most of these. Just by way of example, there's some concern over the port lands, and we flagged this. We know that's going to be an issue going forward because they're not lands that will be owned, and certainly the federal government has jurisdiction over us in terms of land use. But we're going to work with them and meet with them and try to see if we can help come to an understanding and agreement what those lands should and can be in the future for the community. So definitely a concern, well flagged, and we're gonna pursue that one. And a lot of these things that how do we make the small strategies go to the big strategies, and how do we get these results? A lot of this stuff you'll find in the action strategy when you go through the document. There's dozens and dozens of actions and other capital projects that we see as opportunities to partner with our stakeholder organizations in the community and drive forward a lot of this positive change. So you'll find that in action strategies. Hopefully that'll answer some of your questions and concerns. And there's a question about the existing people in the community who are underprivileged to live below the poverty line. The plan does not at any point contemplate having people displaced through investment or through growth. Right now we have an over-representation of poverty probably in all three of these areas. And the plan is to try to drive growth and drive investment. And that doesn't mean that you displace anybody who's currently in the neighborhood. You can, a new building doesn't displace people because there's nobody there. If the rents do increase due to investment, then the plan does contemplate having some strategies and looking at strategies that are existing in other communities in North America to make sure that people aren't forced out. But we do have to get people in, and we need to drive investment, so that's the goal. Okay, any other burning questions right now? We can add to these, or is there any thoughts, concerns?
Just a quick thought, Jody, in terms of how does this plan integrate not only with our other plans that we've got, sort of we're at the driver's seat on, but just with your last comment, you made me think about so for example, the national housing strategy that's coming down. So the feds and the provincial government are now working, and how are we going to make sure that the municipal voice is in that room as well? And it dovetails with the previous comments you made, right? As the worry that new investment just means you're going to push a bunch of folks out. But how do we fit this plan into the housing strategy for the city of St. John, and in particular these areas? So I don't think we're there yet, from what I've been told. The province is just in very early discussions with the federal government, but we should make sure that we're represented there as well.
And I would add that Living SJ are one of our key community partners, and we're working with them actively on this project.
Other comments? Carry on then. Part 3, the design framework. The objectives of this section are to encourage high-quality development in our community. We want to see results in helping continue a comfortable pedestrian environment, to encourage that form of transportation. That mode, I should say. Have clarity and predictability around our bylaws, so people who are investing in this community can know exactly what to expect. We need to have development that's sensitive to the heritage context of the community, whether it's in heritage or not. We want to have quality development that is sensitive to that and helps build on that tradition and helps build to the next era of what will be new heritage in the future. We want to have flexible, innovative development, so we don't want to refine people from exploring more creative and modern approaches to development. And we want to have street improvement guidelines, so when streets are redone, it's a predictable, transparent outcome in terms of treatments of sidewalks, landscaping, curbing, and all that stuff. So we want to make sure that that's something that we map out intentionally. The design guidelines contemplate all forms of development, from townhouses, low-rise, mid-rise, tall buildings, to parking garages, to ensure that those are treated, all result in a quality development. And the bylaw looks at height and step-back framework in the peninsula, both inside and outside the heritage, to try to protect, have a scale development, so as it descends along the waterfront, it preserves sight lines to important landmarks and natural areas in the community. Try to ensure that things are built to a human scale, reflecting that sort of built environment of the Central Peninsula. Again, a heritage-sensitive approach, and acknowledging where tall buildings currently are, not making them conform to a different standard. The previous eras that currently exist, the height is sort of regulated in two different municipal bylaws. So this is the plan identifies a need to have that more consolidated and predictable for investors. So the heritage bylaw would contemplate buildings up to the cornice line, and then the zoning bylaw would regulate height beyond that point for 2 stories, and then if anything was larger than that, it would go to council for approval. So that the process is clear, it's predictable, transparent, and democratic. So the heritage in the Central Peninsula, this is our consultants we hired reaffirmed to us our value of our heritage, that it's a great program. You have a great heritage assets, they provide a lot of value to our community. So the heritage bylaw really, the outcomes are to how do we build on this and make it even better than it currently is, and help people who invest in it to invest in it further. And this map just shows you where currently heritage is and the extent of the St. John fire. So some of the challenges, I guess, currently was, there's prescriptive infill regulations in the bylaw. Property maintenance is not covered in the bylaw. It's inadequate demolition controls to protect our heritage assets. And there's a lot of restrictions on modern materials, and non-visible facades are treated probably a little too strictly in the bylaw. So the opportunities, we can capitalize on rich heritage while allowing a balanced approach that helps drive investment. We want to have that investment. It's directed toward what is probably our most densely populated area of the city, which has a great return on investment. But we want to have that quality of development and design at a high standard. And again, it needs to be clear and predictable for people who want to invest in that area. The objectives are to modernize our heritage preservation process for infill, be less prescriptive, make it easier to maintain heritage homes if you live in a heritage area, and still take good quality infill projects. So these are all positive outcomes for people in the heritage area. It's a style-based approach to development, so it's sort of a spectrum along a development scale, one being sort of simulating heritage, and at the opposite end, more modern development that stands out against heritage. All of this would be through a process permitted through the Heritage Board, although maybe in the middle area we'd see we'd want to get people to land more often than not, but that's not to discourage these other forms, especially with new architecture and architects exploring their creative sides and wanting to develop interesting buildings will stand out and also complement the heritage context around them. So sometimes modern architecture can really help bring about the style and appeal of heritage adjacent to it. That's all being reviewed by the Heritage Board currently, and that review process will help develop that framework of how these applications would be contemplated. So how will heritage be improved? New growth and investment in the heritage area. It will make the maintenance of heritage buildings easier for those who invested in them, and make demolishing our heritage assets more difficult. And the bylaw itself will have updated statements of significance, added flexibility for new materials and technology. There will be less stringent regulations for building facades not visible from the street, and overhaul the infill development standards. Will strengthen the demolition provisions and add new provisions for vacant and dilapidated heritage buildings. So, again, that was a very quick look at what was our design and heritage overview. Are there any? Actually, not questions. I guess we're going to do the color-coded. Yeah, you're at your lighted intersection. Are you green? Are you yellow? Are you red? Or greens? Positive?
Not easy.
Okay.
You guys get the votes?
Can I just ask a question? I know I'll be short, but for demolition, and you're saying you're going to make it more difficult. If somebody has a building that's falling down, that's in the heritage area, and they really want to take it down for a particular reason, then it's a very, I guess, credible reason. I mean, why would we make it more difficult? To me, that's the city being very negative.
I don't think that for extreme circumstances that we would wouldn't allow it. It's to say that if somebody wanted to demolish a heritage building that wasn't in the condition you described, we wouldn't be so quick to approve it, because there are opportunities to reinvest in heritage and bring it up to a good condition.
Like if
before
somebody
demolishing.
owns a building and they're not willing to sell it, and it is heritage, and they're not willing to fix it up, and they just let it crumble away, our hands are pretty much tied on that, and to make it, you know, very difficult for them to do that. I just don't think that's a good way for the municipality to be. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I can just address that if you like. So certainly, council will set policy on this, and how far you want to go on that spectrum is really up to council. But really, the goal here is try to prevent that demolition by neglect. And you can right now, there is the ability to exempt properties that are in dangerous states from the heritage process, but certainly council has the ability to strengthen demolition controls as well. Right now it's effectively a waiting period. You can extend that for a longer period of time, or you can prevent demolition altogether, and that's really enabled by the Act. So it's really trying to understand how far council will want to go on that spectrum, and that's not those aspects are coming later to council. The focus for the initial phase of amendments will be around standards for infill development. So we'll be coming back to have a conversation.
Does it work the other way also, that if council wants to move it faster, they can do so?
Yes, you can decide, set policy on whichever way you wish to go.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. So let's get to the what's important to you and what are the burning questions, concerns. So write those down again and stick to the board. Now this time you're going to stick to the middle board.
Please keep moving.
Try not to stick to the person beside you.
Oh, Jerry.
Terrible. Awful. That was funny, John. That's one of his lines. I did pretty good. You said I couldn't go that far. Oh, I didn't know. Did pretty good.
He's saying something. I gotta bring him down one time.
Oh, no. So we're just on that on Facebook. He'll get a full taste of that.
For what? Just because you like cows?
No, for a client. So we're looking at the energy efficiency programs that they've been through, and so what are the different things that we've done with them. Yeah. LEDs are.
Just went for a drive on the season in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were all, people had all kinds of stuff right on the road. I mean, they're but we went in on Brown, we went in to try and go to Brown's Cove, so one side you could get in on their reader, but on the opposite side, I got to where it was all covered, and it's bad, I have no idea what's underneath that. Just get halfway through, and I'm in a rental truck, right here, halfway through.
They're like university. So when we were there, like,
So the thing is, you gotta get that white material, and that's the worst.
oh, they do have LED in there, they have LED in now, in one of them, and another there, so there's, I guess the cows that are sort of in the milking area right away, and then there are cows spreading out over the calves in another barn. Yeah, so the doors are like wide open, but the sun was really
Oh, that's awesome. Is that divided? This picture of the beach?
Yeah. Anyway, it was really interesting, but quarters.
Oh, that looks like something I saw.
It's like a wall.
Yeah, it's the sale, but no, it's not the ride, it's the sale.
Oh, nice.
Personal owner.
For you guys.
You know how you can
I
change
can,
those?
it's so very.
Like, so you get a different view? Even sometimes you go back further, you can see what albums. Yeah, and that, you went to the way you had it.
Interesting, just they voted on it?
Okay, guys, we'll come back together. So that was great. Good stickering again. Great job. Interesting. We had more people that were agreeing and comfortable with what they'd seen in the presentation. Yeah, we have a slight imbalance of concerns against the yellow stickies and red stickies. What we're seeing is sort of things you're in favor of. People like the idea of modernizing the heritage bylaw. You like preserving heritage assets, but there's also an appreciation that we need to have new quality designs occur within the same area. And I like hiding the parking. Okay, that's good. So do I. And there's on the concerns or questions side of things. Is the Heritage Board on board with this? So the Heritage Board is very much so far shown they're in favor. They like what they see. They're reviewing currently the process, as I mentioned, of how we review applications for new designs and new styles. So they have to work out some details, but they like what they see so far. The use of specific materials, including any siding of a building, that's also something that's being reviewed. There is some limitations for some types of sidings being debated. How much is it a percentage of the facade? What do those materials look like, and so forth. But it is meant to be more open to different styles and types of materials. And if that's is there a strong plan to communicate the new heritage bylaws? So that's a good question. They're all good questions. The plan, once the bylaw, the neighborhood plan is adopted, we will have a plan of action to communicate the heritage updates as well as other components of the plan. But yes, there will be a plan in place to communicate that out to the public and help sell the heritage area.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Well, it's your question, Terry, so I think I'll ask you. When you talk about the quality of the projects,
Yeah.
does that include soundproofing for new buildings going in the
Soundproofing, you said?
soundproof?
Soundproofing. Now, are you specifically referring to like the uptown commercial district? Yeah. So we'll get to that in a bit. That is a strategy that we're going to develop. Is the noise strategy?
Perfect.
And that's an early.
Stupid question.
But maybe just to hit the question with respect to the design framework, they do integrate new requirements for noise mitigation, both in the design guidelines for new builds and also in terms of soundproofing for heritage properties as well.
Just
Thank you, Jack.
So what I was, for me, what I was trying to get at, Jody, and a couple of my questions is, you know, I had a meeting recently where somebody was less than positive about, you know, the heritage stock, and I was quite shocked because, you know, there's so much great work that's been done. This question just has come to me. We've seen it in other cities, recently in Boston and other cities. Have we considered a heritage facade? So like in a worst case scenario, you've got a state building that has significant heritage, but the building itself is, you know, it's not feasible, it's not economical. And I have pictures of it, in fact, I can flip over to you. It was a heritage facade in Boston with a with a tower coming out from behind the facade, so the facade was integrated into the building. Have we considered that as we modernize and go forward? And then I'll just, the piece that's missing for me is, you know, on the deputy's question around making it more difficult, and that's not, I know that you gave an explanation for that, but it's the feasibility of, you know, I'm really appreciative of the energy to save some of the heritage buildings, but what's missing is the business case, the dollars, the money to save some of the heritage buildings. So how do we have these two worlds meet each other? Now, demand and more density and will definitely help, but those right now, I feel like those are, again, two ships passing in the night. We should be saving. There's lots of folks that want to buy, but I'm not seeing people lined up that want to buy and invest dollars. So just something to keep in mind as we move forward.
That's a good point.
Do you want me to jump in there on that one? Yeah, so I mean, the approach is to try to make reuse of these buildings a strong economic case for that. So we've come up with recommendations that would allow more flexibility, least cost interventions, and those kinds of things as a first point of focus. There will be, and I think the step back drawing that Jody presented certainly envisions the potential for modern interventions on top of existing heritage buildings. So, you know, a contrasting glass addition provided a step back from the facade. That certainly is envisioned in the heritage design framework, but the focus, I would say, is on making the economics of heritage conservation work.
And I can jump into that, and we're seeing a lot of recent investment. I can think of a couple of different groups and partnerships that are adapting and rehabilitating formerly derelict buildings, and it's proving very successful for them. So we're hoping to see more of that.
We're going to keep on trudging along here because we're a little bit behind time. So I'm going to walk you through the next section, which is the action plans, action strategy, and I'll probably try to go a little bit faster so we don't keep you here too long. We do want to have a round table at the end of this, which we have right now. So key considerations: investments need to line up with our long-term financial strategy. That's of critical importance. It has to be consistent with smart growth principles, with the guiding principles also part of our municipal plan. And we should try to leverage existing and future investments as much as possible. Party filters. How do we generate priorities? If they were in line with other city strategies, and then these actions were identified as up the ladder priorities, and we reviewed all the actions with the neighborhood action team. So that group gave us a great feedback in terms of what they felt were important features for early return and high impact for positive change. So there's something at a potential for stronger change in the community, more positive change, then that would be obviously make it more of a high priority. So we put them into 4 buckets: immediate term, short term, medium term, and long term. And just because there are so many actions that when you read the plan, there's so many actions and strategies in this plan, that we had to really put them into a reasonable time frame. So how can we accomplish all this? And it's very ambitious, and in terms of trying to get this much work done and in the time frame, but we think it's achievable, and if we need to move things around to make it more achievable, then we will. The action strategies are situated into different buckets to make sure we're looking at the development and investment of the community from all perspectives. So from city prospers, how do we grow? We're open to business. How do we communicate that out? City forward, how do we make sure we're investing in everybody in the community, making sure everybody and all the economic spectrums are part of that community going forward. City beautiful, how do we beautify the public realm and make it a nice, pleasant place to invest and live? City vibrant, how do we build on what's been very successful arts and culture scene in the community the last few years? City green, how do we improve our performance from an environmental perspective? And City connect, how do we make sure all modes of transportation are welcome and part of our streets, and helping build that sort of complete streets concept where walking, cycling, transit, and automobiles are existing. So you can see there's a long list of action items that are in that's just 10-year work plan. So that's about 37 actions to do in 10 years. And those are, this is in collaboration with our community partners and stakeholders. So that's how we see this as being achievable. It's an innovative plan that integrates our community partners in meaningful ways to help bring to life some of the components that will be noticeable in the community. This is outside the capital strategy that were part of the big moves, which are more sort of council budget items. So just a quick, I'll show you 7 or 8 of these quickly that were in that 10-year action plan. One is strategic enforcement. So how do we line up our enforcement strategies to bring about change in the key areas that we've identified for change? How do we look at the continuation of incentive programs, including an innovative livery work initiative that is identified as a strategy in the plan that other communities in North America have done. But how do we use these strategies to help drive growth in the key corridors and key areas of our community where we think could be catalytic in terms of their ability to change those areas? At City Vibrant, how do we look at a new arts and culture framework to help strategize and be intentional about how we integrate arts and culture into our community and build on that existing vibrant dynamic. Also, looking at Harbor Passage, we need to identify opportunities to improve our public amenities along Harbor Passage. It's a great corridor for active transportation, but what about sitting and relaxing, enjoying that space in a different capacity to make it even more useful to the community? And identifying opportunities to pilot pedestrian streets. Maybe there's opportunities where we can take one of our character corridors in the uptown and make it into a pedestrian street to grow on that vibrancy. As we mentioned a couple times, the need for a new school in the South End is already being looked at, but how do we maximize that investment and make sure that we're getting the most out of it? There's concepts and plans for urban forestry. How do we make sure that we're getting, we're greening our streets effectively and making sure that we're providing the best in the public realm who lives here? And Rainbow Park, we need to look at strategy for Rainbow Park in terms of building it out again, or to its end, and complete that space for the community. Active transportation, again, this needs to implement an active transportation network, which will be a deliverable from the Move SJ plan as well. And this is an early identified outcome of the plan is to have a balanced solution to the noise issues in the urban core area. And it's got to contemplate impact of residents, development costs in the vibrant core, and find that sweet spot where things are allowed to occur and be noisy, and outside of that, they're regulated more tightly. So, in the first 2 years, immediate actions, again, these lined up with existing strategies or had momentum or had potential for big impact. These 6 items from undertaking a blight response program, implementing a noise strategy, evaluate the locations and numbers of waste receptacle locations, reviewing our incentive program, having an urban design information campaign so people in the community are aware of what our urban design guidelines are going to be, and undertake a residential market study that comes from investors who told us they'd like to see something like that. So capital strategies, these are the ones that they support the big moves that we went through. They embody smart growth principles to ensure that we're getting the best quality outcomes, and they have positive return on investments for our dollars spent. And I just want to, before we jump into those, just couch this and remind you that this is coming at a very exciting time in the Central Peninsula. It's certainly in my lifetime, and since Councillor Reardon said she came here in 1980, and in 1980 when Councillor Law was a young man of 60 years old. You've never seen.
It was a compliment.
Thank you, Jody.
Doesn't have his hair on, Jody.
He also knows where you live, Jody.
Yes. I know your mother.
Talking about my mother and where I live. The uptown population is on the increase, as we've seen. We think that's going to continue, and it's a positive drive in the right direction. The tourism is increasing at the same time. Lots of attention in this part of the city. There's more new developments than this part of the city has seen in forever. More events. There's really unique cultural events that are happening. Last year was a great example where the whole summer was just chock full of great unique St. John events. There's more restaurants, bars, and coffee shops than there have been in decades. A new school is planned, a new museum planned. So great momentum in the peninsula, and coming out the plan now, it's striking while the iron's hot and pushing the needle even further along in the right direction. So we're very excited about this plan, and we think the outcomes are going to be coming soon and quick and positive. And one other piece of evidence to this, as you know, the beautification program is in its third year now, just starting out in this year. But until now, we've seen the green properties are showing you where applicants have come and invested in their facades through this program to help beautify their properties, but contribute to the public realm and the beautification of the city. The purple ones are the incentive programs where we've seen developers coming through our program and invest in buildings, mostly investing in old buildings, but at least on one occasion investing in new development. So this is all positive tax-based growth that we're seeing in our community as a result of current and ongoing interest. So there are various projects in the Central Peninsula that are currently being considered for investment through capital projects, as you're probably aware. And building on that, there's the capital projects in the short-term plan identifies. Again, this is ambitious, but we know that. But they include the new museum, that's a different level of government. That's it's going to occur. That's great. The Fundy Key Harbor Passage, Fundy Key Water Street RFP, a laneways concept and strategy, city market strategy, new school development, St. James Street corridor redevelopment, Ringwood Park reevaluation and completion, and Germain Street extension. That's the one that opens it up to Broad Street, and Harbor Passage to Pecan Beach, which is also anticipated to be an early outcome. In the medium term, an even longer list of items identified as potentially occurring, from the Fundy Key seawall, the Barber's Store site redevelopment, all the way down to Barrack Green sports fields and green spaces beside it. They're being repositioned for the community. So I won't go through them all, but there's a lot of anticipated capital projects in the medium term. And in the 8 years and onward, longer term, we have fewer items like the development of Marsh Creek, the Harbor Passage extension, the Jura Refinery, passive recreational space, and possibly the repositioning of Barrack Green's building itself for community use. When you look at all of these together combined, this is imagining in 30 years' time, 20 years' time, that we have done all of these things. And if you can imagine our community, this is the impact it would have. And that's on top of the other list of 67 action strategies I just showed you. So that is a collective impact that will be significant and catalytic in terms of its change in our community and what is the heart of our community in Uptown South End. So, actioning the plan. Phil, do you want to run through this one, or you want to?
Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see your red, greens, and yellows cards in terms of what area of comfort you are with what you just seen.
Put it down.
Okay. Donna, do you have a color? Or you?
Yeah, it's right on the
Okay.
top there.
Relax.
Okay. Let's write down your comments and stick those on the board, and we'll transition quickly into our discussion.
Me for sure, yeah.
What?
Yeah, oh yeah. What about the energy? Are you going around one conversation?
Yeah, but it's the same as
Yes.
this.
Well, it's a workshop with PAC.
You just
But it's,
listen.
but it's, yeah, it's a special meeting on the
Yeah, that's
neighborhood
right.
plan.
So, where you going? Was it at the board?
I don't care which way, but or night, what's that?
Well, new conversation, economy, immigration.
Well, they usually it's
Oh, yeah?
When's that?
That's a beauty for the 740.
Energy thing tomorrow morning for the Union Club, 7:30. I figured we were on the energy thing. I don't know what it is, I might go down.
some people's
It's
behavior.
close.
Okay, that was great. Good feedback. There seems to be a lot of excitement around the market study, a lot for the implementation plan, pedestrian streets, building on strengths of Carver Passage. So a lot of this stuff seems to be well received. On the more dominant red side, there's a call for some more details and sort of what those strategies are. That's fair. We didn't have really the time tonight to go into that, but we do have more strategies that we'd like, the implementation that we'd like to eventually share. And where we don't have details yet, we'll dig in and do that as we're actioning or implementing the plan. Communication strategy also for like how are we going to go forward with the community to update them on the plans and the concepts. There will be a communication strategy through the implementation to make sure we're communicating out to all our stakeholders and people living in the community what the plan says. And specific actions, I guess, City Beautiful, what about clean, need for uptown to cared for booth, have a cared for booth. Okay. There's
Cared for.
I think it's a kissing booth.
No, it's to have the uptown look as if it's cared for.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yes.
And not shabby and not holes in the sidewalks and everything else. You want to start at the bottom?
Right, that's right.
You
So
want to make it look good for
absolutely, yeah, and
everybody?
that's the intention of the City Beautiful action plan as well as some of the capital projects are to like do exactly that. Let's look at how can we use enforcement, how can we look at what other communities are doing for making their communities more beautiful, and reinvesting in our own assets. Absolutely, that's a strategy we need to look at. And sugar refinery site could be capped and covered in the short term. That's true. It could be, and I think Jeff looked into that a bit, the front end of the process. And if you just cap and cover some portions of it, you can use it for more active use, passive uses or temporary uses, and not necessarily, which wouldn't be as onerous in terms of regulations if you were to do residential development. So there's opportunities there for cap and covering. And we are going to, as I said before, we are going to get back to you on all of these. There's a lot of comments. We don't have the time to do it tonight, but we'll review those and look at those and get back to you as soon as we can. engagement. Okay, so we'll quickly run through this. The engagement plan is, there's 4 phases occurring between May and December. We're here, core stakeholder engagement. We're really active right now. Going back to our core group of stakeholders to make sure that we get their concerns, see what they love with the plan, and make whatever adjustments we have to, which we will continue to do through June. And the process for engagement feedback in July would be launched, and the adoption plan process would be going from August to about November, where we're projecting. This could change, it's subject to change, but we're projecting to have this before you in November. So the draft engagement plan, core stakeholder engagement objectives to confirm the content is in line with expectations of the core project governance partners, increase comfort with the suite of documents, and also that would be the heritage bylaw and design guidelines that we looked at. And the approach for doing this would be like through workshops and focus groups. The public feedback period was to build on community-wide awareness and familiarity, solicit feedback to inform changes to the documents, and our approach there again would be for focus groups. We're contemplating a storefront access at ground level for people to come in and discuss face-to-face with us, and online and social media platforms also be developed to make sure we're getting the community, the larger community's feedback. And phase 3 of the process engagement for feedback, it would be to compile the feedback and present to council, work through feedback and prioritize required changes to the documents, and really that would be through council meetings. And adoption, the adoption objective obviously is to administer the adoption and approval of the neighborhood plan, and the approach would be through the standardized approval process with a public presentation period, PAC, public hearing, first, second, and third meetings. So again, we're hoping to get there by end of November, with council having heard it, PAC having heard it, the stakeholders having been engaged, and feedback being revised, and the plan reflecting everybody's expectations. So it's, oops, I have the right slide. Feedback summary. So far, we worked at Heritage recently. They're excited about the design guidelines. They support the bylaw amendments. The minor concern with the, you talked about that previously, they have some concerns over the infill, and they're currently reviewing that. What's the best practice going forward? How to review applications for infill. Neighborhood action team, they're excited about the plan. They wish to remain active throughout the implementation process, and they have concerns around managing expectations, but I think I saw that concern written on the board somewhere. And they like the development of arts and culture plan as an early deliverable, because they see that as a key driver for population and growth in the community going forward. Planning Advisory Committee, we're meeting them tomorrow night, so that will be filled out. And senior leadership team, they support the plan, and again, managing expectations has come up as a key concern there as well. So we recognize that, and we'll have to make sure that we are able to manage expectations, and if so, if we need to shuffle around some priorities in order to do that, then we'll have to review that option.
Jody, could you just go back to the timeline slide for just a sec? I just wanted to make sure that council understands sort of, you passed it. Sort of where we're at in the process is this workshop is meant to assess if really you have a comfort level for going forward. If you are comfortable in proceeding, the next step would be to come to council on May 22nd, your next meeting of council, and not seek your endorsement on the content in the plan, but seek your approval for moving forward to roll out these documents for a public review period that would include all of the steps that Jody described. So, you know, things like a month-long public review where we would engage with stakeholders, where members of the public could review and test these documents and provide feedback to council before we enter into the adoption process, because that is a legislative process, and really we want to get as much input at this early stage to make sure that we've got this right. This is going to be a 30-year framework for growth and development in the Central Peninsula, and we want to take the time to get it right. So the decision point, the next decision point for council, there'll be many along the way, but the next decision point will be on May 22nd when we seek your support to advance this in the public through the public engagement process.
Thanks for that clarification.
Just add one thing. We tracked how many decision points council will have with this neighborhood plan, and there will be 5 different decision points right until third reading. and that is in addition to PAC's review. That would be a recommendation to council as well. So, and that kind of spans that spectrum that Jody has shared with us.
Sorry, I guess as a result of whipping through something, you should listen. So I apologize if I went too fast there. But yeah, Phil makes a good point. You should feel comfortable knowing that this is going to be before you again, and not, this is not by any means a final verdict. It's just a touch point and feedback loop. So we're mindful that this will come back to you for review. Okay, so with the process piece, red, green, yellow, let's take your temperature. And the mayor moves off yellow.
He said he was going to do yellow, so I said I'd support it.
Okay, thank you. Now this time, only if there's any concerns about the process, just to sticker that when you're red and put it on the empty space on the board. No need for positive comments about process. I don't know what you could say about the process. It's assumed.
It's a positive process, Jody. What you could say.
Okay, well, maybe feel free at any point to get up and stick with that if something occurs to you. It doesn't seem like there's any hands writing, so I'll just move along. Okay, so we're going to do the round table portion. Yes? Good.
Yeah, the one thing that we'd offer if you wanted to is to walk around and to remind, just to go through this if you'd like. You're welcome to kind of go up to the board and before you make your comments to see what's been said, because again, we've dealt with a lot of substance in this conversation so far.
You can comment about anything?
Anything at all, yeah.
It has to do with the plan.
No, make it about the plan.
Go ahead.
We're all waiting for you now.
No, we can go around. I just want to know
Oh
what's
yeah,
going around.
yep, you can.
Talk about
So do you want to do that then, Phil? Do you want to get up and have a look at boards, see what other people have said, and then we'll do a round table to see what your individual thoughts are? Okay, we'll give you about 5-10 minutes. Stand up, stretch your legs, look at the board, communicate with each other. Grab a sandwich.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get, I mean, I'm yelling, not that I'm not supportive, I'm just, this is really detailed, it's a 30-year plan, and I don't want to know all the detail to be in the way, I just want to understand the detail, you know, so I'm very excited by it all. Yeah, it's a long-term plan, it's way past, it's not about us and our council, it's about, is this a solid plan for the city?
Yes.
What is Mr. Gates' September election? Because I'm curious to what he's going to say about the over St. John, Prince Museum, those types of things.
Yeah,
I mean, it
that was,
but he has said in public that
those
fixing things for his validation.
no, he was at long.
Yeah, I did see that. I just like specifically.
Yeah, we went to the lunch, I said,
And I don't know the answer to that question. Because I haven't even seen Lance government yet. Did we hear from the presentation? No, I must have missed it. So it's all well and good, okay?
about a minute or two. Okay, let's get into the next stage because I recognize we're a little bit behind time. I want to thank everybody for going up and reading the board.
That was a good
But no, I actually
pretty
told
comfortable with
Phil that
each
part
other.
wasn't going to work. He didn't believe me.
If you had had a mustache, we would have read it. Take the mustache off, we're not taking the
That's right, that's right. So what we're going to do at this point, I want to take, we're a little bit behind time, but still it's very important that we get your individual statements and comments. We'll do around the table. And we're going to start with the mayor. Before we do that, I just want to acknowledge that we did the introductions at the outset, but Kay wasn't here, and I just want to acknowledge Kay as a chairperson for the Neighborhood Action Team, an important community member in the South End who's been active in a lot of different fronts over the years. So they did a great job, and Kay did a great job in leading them. So kudos to Kay. And I guess Jeff Sear has gone home, but kudos to Jeff for the bulk of the work that he did at the outset. Is he? Well,
He's somewhere.
somebody just text him and tell him I thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is let's hear your comments, your feedback, and that could be from your pink or yellow concept ideas. What do you think is important about this plan, and what do you see as hurdles, or whatever you think is important? But let's keep it to, I'd say, a couple minutes, Phil. That's reasonable. Okay, so we'll start with the mayor, and maybe go this way.
Okay.
And I'm keeping it.
No problem. Okay.
I have a zapper.
Okay, so here are my, I guess, quick comments. I'm interested in how the small moves, I'm getting repetitive here, but how the small moves fit into the big moves. So, not getting, I'm excited about an infill on one street, but if that infill on one street holds us back from taking down an entire block and reimagining that as 25 walk-up townhomes. So let's just see how these fit in. Again, small moves fit into the big moves. The resourcing of the plan, i.e. people and dollars. I'm yellow carding tonight, not because I'm not supportive. I'm yellow carding because I just have a few more. I want to absorb this information. I like the implementation plan, but I just think we need to have more discussion around people and dollars. Getting people bought in to find the early adopters and the early wins, but again, that fit in, I think that's going to be critically important. Managing expectations, I hyper-emphasize that I think we have, not intentionally, but often said we're going to do things that weren't supported with sound business plans that failed, and we have this circle of just constant negativity that we're constantly fighting about. So we have an opportunity here moving forward. This is a wonderful document, but managing expectations going forward is going to be critical. I think the market study is one of the best implementation items that I saw there. I think we need to clearly understand what people want so we can match that up and we can get some, again, early wins. I.e. take advantage of the demand. I am concerned that we don't have the product right now to satisfy demand. We have to manage resistance because there just seems to always be in this city. How does this fit in with other plans and actions? We talk about it, but we just have to be really conscious of that. So this is, we have to work through and evolve through being a loyalist city. And I mean that I'm proud of our heritage, but I also think there's a negative connotation of our loyalist city and the perceptions around that, closed, resistance, fighting things all the time. And lastly, what's the corporate discipline necessary to be successful here? How will we enhance the culture And what is the corporate discipline necessary to be successful? I.e. focus. We can't be everything to everybody. We have a big city. If we are going to be sustainable and prosper moving forward, there's tremendous advantages here. But what discipline is going to be required of this body and of every group within the city? And lastly, how will we enhance the culture and have clear roles for employees, citizens, the business community, and how they will help this plan come to reality? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Deputy Mayor?
I thought you were going that way.
No, fine.
Well, overall, I like the plan. I think the plan's well done. I say thank you to everybody that worked on it. And I think it was needed, and we've got it now. But I hope that when we go public with this plan, that we make sure the public understands there's a time frame. You know, because we can't do, like a lot of the big things in this plan, the growth in this plan, the increase in residential, business, even some of the things you pointed out, the museum, new school and so on forth, that's kind of all up in the air. It's not reality at the moment. And it's going to take a lot of other people besides this level of government to make it happen. And there's no guarantees. So, you know, I remember years ago, well, I don't remember, but I've read about it, when the city had a plan, they're going to have 200,000 people here. We never had that happen, and we've always lived, and people have pointed to that saying, well, you're not doing what you should because that didn't happen. So you got to be realistic. So I don't want us to put this plan out thinking that it's going to all happen at once, because it's not. There's a lot of growth in this plan, and there's a lot of issues in here that a lot of people have to be involved in, and that's why it brings me to the point where there has to be some little things that we can do ourselves to improve, even if it's just a look at the uptown. Because if we don't do any action items this year or within the next year and a half, then people, the public will say, oh, they did a plan, but nothing happened. And we've had a lot of plans in the city of St. John that have never taken any legs. They just go to the shelf somewhere. So that's a big thing for me. Like that's when I say, can we even make the city more beautiful, but make the city clean? Like we have an advantage here. We have an opportunity that a lot of cities don't have, and that we have thousands of people come in this city on the cruise ships, and we don't do anything. I mean, we don't have a team. We should have a works team or a parks team, whatever, that's dedicated to the uptown to make sure that this city is spotless at all times through the summer. And that would just show people that, oh, the city's really trying. They're really trying to bring the uptown together and to make it nicer for everyone. And people will move here from Rothsay or Crispin. They will not move here to kind of a dirty, uncared-for city. And, you know, I can walk up King Street right now, and so can you, and I might trip over a broken piece of pavement, or, you know, the grass will be growing up in the sidewalks, especially up in Charles Street and some of the main streets. So I think that it's great to have all the big plans. I like them, but we need investment to do that. But we've got to do some of the little things to make sure people know. Like wash your sidewalks. I mean, sometimes you go up King Street and the sidewalks are filthy. I'm talking about summertime. We got those stupid signs that we never had a bylaw on, and you could trip over them and break your leg at any time. There's all kinds of little things we could do as a city to start this process.
So early wins focused on beautification. Okay.
So other than that, I really think everybody did a great plan. I was in favor of from the beginning, and I like to see it. But before we move to the next part of the city, we really have to do some of the issues that are in this one.
Okay.
You know, to move next year to another part of the city for a neighborhood plan without accomplishing anything, then I think we're moving too fast. So that's my thoughts again.
Thank you.
Thanks. Follow up on something that the deputy had said about showing that the plan is more than a plan. We have a reputation in the city of doing plans and not doing stuff. I guess a couple of suggestions for me to simple and visual, like a couple of things that I've heard about whether it be capping Sugar Refinery site or something with Harbor Passage, which people are familiar with and already happy with. Would be a couple of things that are somewhat significant, but I think relatively easy to do that would have good visual impact and kind of help get momentum for the implementation. Policy implementation, so that this is something we're going to be starting to roll this out in 2019, and then there's an election in 2020. So some policy implementation to make sure that this survives into the next council, and an education part into the next council to make sure that they're very much up to speed on what's going on and that it's rolling forward, so you don't hit that first budget and suddenly the money disappears for the plan that's being implemented.
The easiest way to do that is just get reelected.
Well, which rolls in, and Kevin in the finance department, I like the fact that this is laid on the long term so that we can fit it in with a 10-year financial plan that we're working on, and that might help with the other parts that I already spoke of. A lot of capital requirements in there. I don't know if we've got a total on it yet, but we certainly have a limited amount of capital of our own funds. So I hope that's just that it's prioritized, so that if we were by policy at the finance committee level to say, you know what, we want to allocate X amount of capital dollars to the South End plan, that it's ready to go, as opposed to, okay, we don't have the dollars that fit this 1 or 2 year time frame. You understand what I'm saying? So just to prioritize it so that if some money's committed, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
And there doesn't have to be more discussion down the road. I guess those would be my comments right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilor Norton?
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Yeah, I guess just this is more of a comment, but the engagement of the plan, it strongly reflected those who live, invest, and work in the peninsula, and I guess that certainly makes me confident of the plan and the right moves that the plan contemplates. So for that, hats off to the team. Resourcing the plan remains a concern, especially when I consider other outstanding issues that are recurring in other ward communities. This is a big body. This is a big body of work, and sometimes the communication or the messaging with that is that the South Central Peninsula is front and center and may be the only community in the city of St. John when other wards are struggling. I understand this is a plan, it's a phased out approach, however, that sometimes is some of the table talk that's out there, and I completely understand that. The other thing is starting early, and I guess what I mean by that comment is I don't know if it's necessary to wait for other community plans, community action plans to take shape or be born. When we see good things that are working in the Uptown Peninsula by way of this plan, then let's not wait to action another plan before we port those strategies and those actions over to other parts of our city. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor McCarthy?
Thanks, Jody. Some things I've already said. A couple of comments and a couple of concerns, please. So I understand the plan's a good plan. I mean, we're concentrating on the product that we have going well in the city right now, so we should. I mean, in our business, there's an old saying, buying begets buying, okay? Money will follow where money's going, so, and it's vogue down there. This is good timing, I think, for this plan. I will say, though, and Greg hit on it just a minute, I'll say it a different way, but I understand we have to have an offering down here, but let's not forget about the rest of the city, okay? Big Mac's, McDonald's, big seller, but they sell a McRib once in a while too, okay? So let's not forget about the other parts of the city. We're still out there. So not everyone wants to be downtown, okay? We've got to have an offering for everyone's, we should have an offering for everyone. Public engagement, you know, let's keep it realistic with them. I think that's important. You ask the public what they want, and they'll want everything. All right, and it's true. Very, very seldom the public will say, no, take this back, I don't want it. They'll want that and some more. So let's keep it realistic with them, okay? Concerns about budgets have been brought up already, whether it's manpower or actual dollars. I think the next part of your presentation, there should be, I didn't see anything on it right in this presentation at all, nothing about dollars. So I think it's going to be part of the next presentation. What do we think this costs? I know it's a longer term plan, but still implementing it costs dollars somewhere. And again, Gary said it very nicely. Integrate it with finance and Mr. Fudge's people. And when we finally start to implement the plan, it would be my wish, okay, that we have some immediate wins, big, small, or in between. Immediate wins, okay, and then promote the bejesus out of them. We want to say, look, this is our plan. Look, it's already working. You know, anyone that started the campaign to raise money knows they've got half the money raised before they started out, okay, and that's the whole idea. So you really want it popular. You really want it to, you know, hit the ground running. That's what I'd like to see happen. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councilor Sturbridge?
I think it's a great plan. I don't really have any big list of things to offer. I think it's good from what I see of it. Yeah, I'm pleased. Congratulations on the work. I mean, it's big. There's lots of positivity in there, and yeah, I think it's good.
Thank you. Councilor Reid?
Thank you, Jody. The plan's excellent. I think, you know, and I guess I'm biased, we haven't worked on it, but I think it's an excellent plan. It is ambitious, it's also very exciting, and I think right now there are things already happening, and we need to get out in front of those things if we want to make sure that there's some strategy to what's happening out there. Density's our savior, we already know that. You only got 2.5 square kilometers out there. You got 3,700 people per square kilometer versus 37 somewhere else. I think, like, it's grade 2 or 3 math. Like, that's where you need to be looking if we're going to provide services. So it makes sense to do it right now. A couple of things that I have in mind, I guess when I looked at it, I'm more specific than everybody's other comments. Like, I'd like to see us, because we have the expertise, choose a site for the school. And I know that there's no guarantee that DOT will go with it. They don't have any expertise in choosing a site. So I'd like us to drive that, and then they can turn it down, or they can do whatever they want to do with it. I love the bylaw changes, but I'd like to see more for pedestrian safety. And the tent signs that Shirley mentioned would be included in that, and cars parking on sidewalks. A lot of that can be changed if we make those bylaws. Then you can have your parking people ticket for that stuff. You can make the money. So there's lots of things you can do with that. I want to see us work with Service New Brunswick. All those vacant lots are all assessed at $5,000. People that don't live here own them. They're paying $160 in property taxes a year. There's no incentive to sell or do anything with them. So what are we trying to incent? And what is the province trying to incent? And can we get together on that one? So I want to see us work with them. Our infrastructure that we have here, like the Rainbow Park, it should be integrated into the school process. All of our infrastructure should be integrated with something else. It's just like Port City Royal realizing that if we're not using our kitchen in the morning and at lunch, why doesn't somebody else use it? So, and we should be doing that for all of our infrastructure on this peninsula, rather than duplicating it. Let's see, what else have I got here? So those are some of the things. Now, as far as expectations, the South End, 50% of its kids live in poverty. They don't even know what first world problems are. So I think your expectations are going to be limited. This whole neighborhood has been used to be stripped for the last 40 years of everything. And really, we've got broken asphalt sidewalks. I mean, it was at one time the heart of your city, but it's been neglected for 40 years. I don't think there's going to be big demands. I think people are just going to be so happy to see that there's something coming out. So and I think that we need to understand what our heritage structures mean to us. And Newfoundland's got the little colored buildings. They promote that. You know what Newfoundland is. You know it's barren. I mean, on every airplane you go, they've got their brand. BEI has got, their summer frolicking on the beaches. We know what that is. And we have got this infrastructure here. And if you think you're going to tear that down and put density up and become Halifax, it's not going to happen. If somebody wants to go to a big boring city, you can go to any other city that's bigger and a lot more boring than St. John. So I think I think we've got something very special down there, so we need to be very, very cognizant of that. We need to be careful what we do with it. And, you know, I know Jerry would like to get the bulldozer, get rid of all the vacant buildings, but, you know, that's our brand. It's our brand. And we've never, ever supported that. We've never, ever used that. And I think that's a mistake, and I think I recognize it because I'm not from St. John. And I think it's just like everything else. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. You know, so I worry about the heritage infrastructure. I think the plan is good. I think it needs a lot of changes, but I don't want it bulldozed either. So, you know, so I guess that's where I am on that. And I'd love to see the sugar refinery happen, the sugar refinery site happen with a little bit of cap and cover. You've got, the port's got infrastructure. You could do what New York did with the High Line. You could make an industrial park down there. Easy and quick. You know, it would, and that would spark even more development and more interest in the town. So I think, you know, as long as we're putting some money in, a little bit, it doesn't take much, then you will have development that will come. If they see that the city supports it, they need to know that the support is there from the city. The city hasn't supported that area in 40 years. And that's why you haven't had any development there in 40 years.
Just to clarify, Councilor Reardon, when you said that the sugar refinery site could be industrial park, you meant to put a park in a post-industrial area, or did you mean a new industrial
No, sorry. I'm talking about like the High Line in New York, where they took
but
all
that's
that
why
old
they-
train infrastructure and now it's a park
Right.
for people. But they kept the infrastructure because it's the part of the history of that area. And it's so significant. People love it. When you go down there, you walk that High Line, it's packed. You know, and so you've got infrastructure. The port has cranes or whatever they could put over there. You could do the cap and cover relatively inexpensively, I guess is what I'm saying, and make it an industrial park for people.
A park in the post-industrial area.
In a green park. A green park, yeah, with an industrial theme, I guess
Make that
is what I'm
point of
saying.
clarification. Thank you.
Thank
Councilor
you.
Lowe?
I agree with all that stuff, but when you did the one in St. John the Baptist, King Edward, it wasn't attended very well by people in the south end. There was very few people participating in King Edward St. John the Baptist School. So I suggest, and I'm talking the lower south end towards Crown, and it actually showed it on the map, the participation. They weren't at the school. Pulse wasn't at the school, which represents the lower part of the south end. So if there's going to be more public meetings, I think you have to pinpoint the people and bring them out. I mean, Pulse can tell you who they are, I can tell you, Donna can tell you. And I'm going back to that meeting at the school. We were looking around, they weren't there. Germain Street, they were all covered by people, but the lower south end towards Crown wasn't, right? The peninsula is surrounded by 3 bodies of water, and it's all controlled by the port. Have we met with the port? Have we discussed all these things with the port? Because they control Potash in one end, Broad Street, they control the back end, and they control everything on Water Street. So they totally dominate the peninsula on the outskirts of it, right? And until we get dialogue or until we get agreements with them to do something, then, you know, we're tied up big time. All we're talking about is inside the water. And look out there, you can see it. We're surrounded by water. We're surrounded by the port, which is federal jurisdiction, every bit of it. The third thing is, and this is definitely not negative, because I think the report is excellent. Definitely moving in the right. We got to get somehow where we can clean up vacant yards that are containing garbage and dump and tear buildings down faster than what we are. And I'm not being critical, because I think last year we hit the total of 85. But, you know, they're either coming down or we're burning them down. Last night, Rockland Road, that was a dump. It has been there for ages and ages and ages. But in the peninsula, there's the picture of one of these show. That's 224 Duke Street. And I've been talking about 224 Duke Street since I came on council. And it's still down, except it doesn't have the 3 mattresses and the garbage can out front. But it's still standing there. And there's a process, but it takes way too long. Way, and whether it's a provincial government that does it or not, we got to do something, you know, to get a building down, to tear it down. you gotta go through a ritual, which is crazy. And to improve the city, we gotta do those things, right? Until we do, things aren't gonna work out well for me. But other than that, I think the plan's excellent. I think it's definitely moving in the right direction. It's an area that I think, and like I said earlier, 20, 30 years, you won't believe it's a South End. It'll be, we don't have the product right now to put people in there, but we will have it. And that way there, all these things you want will come future. Done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. I think the plan's an excellent one. I think that we have a lot of good ideas in here that, forward thinking 10 years, 20 years down the road. I think that's important. Green space is becoming ever more popular, so I like the idea of having a pedestrian roadway. I like the idea of capping the sugar refinery site. The heritage support in the report is excellent. This is, when we talk about heritage, uptown is what most people are talking about. I know it does broaden out some, but the focus is on the uptown heritage, and that's what our tourists go to see. And I don't mean that there's not other heritage other places, but for the most part uptown. Mixed income housing opportunities. We recognize that, there's priority neighborhoods in the peninsula, and that, we can have those opportunities as well. I look forward to seeing, Water Street and the port property developed. I can't think of another port city that doesn't have a development on the port. To Jerry's point, it's just crazy having a parking lot down there, having the waterfront as a parking lot. Crazy thing. You gotta wonder though, like when you think about development, like you think, for example, they talk about the new school in the peninsula. Well, is the new school going to spur development around the new school? So is the location of that school important not only to the school district, but to the city of St. John and the province of New Brunswick? Because typically people will want to live near a school, particularly a brand new school. So it's, I think the location on that, to Donna's point, is key, that everybody has a conversation about where it's going to go and how it's going to affect everybody. And of course, I think that if they do build the museum down there, that'll have the same effect as building a school. It'll attract more development, and to David's point, money follows money. So, I think that we're on the right track. I think the timing is perfect, and yeah, great job.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks for all your individual feedback. That was really good. That's what we wanted to hear. This is, was stated at the outset, this is your plan. This is your baby. This is identified as deliverable for you guys. We want to make sure that we get it right. And all your feedback is important, and we need to hear from each one of you. And if we need to make changes, we need to hear that. And like Phil stated earlier, there's other points of touch points of council where you have your opportunity to get feedback as well. So that's great. I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the mayor just to give some summary comments on what we've heard today, and we'll tie it up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So excellent workshop tonight, first of all. I thought without the sticky notes it would have been a big letdown, but to have all the sticky notes, very strategically color-coded, Phil, thank you very much. But all kidding aside, I think it was an excellent workshop tonight. You've put a tremendous document in front of us. The steering committee, staff, Jeff looks exhausted across from me. He's lifting this thing over to getting closer to the finish line. So thank you very much for that. I heard a lot of really great feedback tonight. some excellent positives about this, but I call it some sort of cautionary tales as well, to say, how do we make sure we don't miss the little stuff? How do we make sure we don't, let's get the little stuff right. Let's manage expectations. Let's keep in mind that we have a big city, and that it can't be, and there certainly is. I think Councillor Norton certainly spoke to it, and Councillor Merrithew. There's certainly some feeling and commentary quite often about the uptown gets everything. I don't think that's entirely true, but I think that we need to be careful as we move through this, and that we, you know, if the uptown is getting all of this renewed horsepower, but yet, you know, some of the elements of Play SJ and the regional parks aren't getting any investment, then hey, well, come on, I live on the west side, or I live in Milledgeville. I want to see some of those plans come to life. So I think those were excellent comments. I think we, you know, and no one said this exact way, and Jody had some information up, but I think the very way the plan is written, when you put an implementation plan and you put short term down, we should be very careful to maybe even put some time, like what does short mean? Short to me means this year. But in a 30-year plan, short could mean, you know, the first decade. So I think, again, just managing that expectation in terms of how we, you know, that implementation plan, I think, is critical. And we've talked a lot about, you know, again, resourcing and so on. I think the early wins are around, I'm being a little, but around demand. We do have demand right now. So where are the areas where this plan can achieve early wins that doesn't really take any resources from the city? So there are developers right now that are interested in developing and building in the uptown. Let's make sure it's a beautiful building, that it fits within the plan, but might not take actually much resource of the city. And maybe it's a develop SJ task, but it fits beautifully within this plan. So the Councillor Merrithew, I think, made the point. Let's find something that we can put a big check mark by it and say that was an early win of the neighborhood action plan, develop SJ, and everybody working in harmony. Somebody was talking about, Jerry maybe was talking about, or Donna and Jerry, I wrote down policy test. So what are the top 10 issues or challenges that we have, whether it's blight or whether it's cleanliness or what have you, and do we have the right policy in place? So if somebody does have a building and it can't be saved, and we've got to go through 3.5 months worth of work to take action, are we pushing those policy changes well enough that we need? And then the flip end example, so why are people continuing to put garbage in front of 224 Duke Street? Do we need a dumpster down at the recycling center? Do we need to pick up, you know, do we need to change our hotline so that we can start to change those behaviors? I mean, I would like people to stop throwing garbage in front of vacant houses, but if they're not going to stop in the short term, can we give folks a telephone number and drive by with the pickup truck the first day, instead of driving back by with the pickup truck on the 10th day and picking it up? So I mean, it's too far in the weeds. So we're sugar refinery site. We've heard a number of times the public engagement. Councillor Lowe talking about getting folks out. You know, a lot of really great feedback. So I'm very proud of when you look at the priorities. The city manager highlighted a couple of areas in our priorities and how this fit in. I'm very proud of this council, and we couldn't have done any of it without staff's support. What this council has done in 24 months in terms of laying down really foundational documents that will survive past, I'm not sure who said it, I think Councillor Sullivan, will survive past our mandate. But those are really solid foundations that are being put in place. I'm very proud that this is another document that will do that. I had a conversation with one of the committee members the other day, and he can be tough. He's tough. He's a visionary thinker, and he said, "I'm so friggin' excited about this plan. This makes me want to live in this city. This makes me excited to be a citizen of this city." So that made me excited. You know, that members of the committee. And, you know, this individual is a guy that can, you know, really help shape a positive future for the city. He's really excited. So you know, you could say you could expect that, but this guy, if he wasn't excited, he'd take the whole document, put it in the shredder. So I was excited that he was excited, if that makes any sense. And I'll just end with two last comments. One, I was reminded a couple of days ago, citizens elect us to make decisions, to be leaders, to be strategic. We've had a great committee of folks together. They've been strategic. You've put a lot of time and energy in this. I wouldn't wait for a gym full of 500 people. We just don't get it. And if anything, I'd suggest to you, like we get sometimes the same 20 contributors all the time. We've been elected, you know, to make good decisions, to put the city's best interest into documents like this. We've had a task group that has spent night after night after night together. it's time for action now. Like, I'm not going to sit back if 500 or 1,000 people don't come out. We've been elected to make good decisions, to put the best documents we know how. And this is not cement. It's a good document. It's a long-term document. The other thing that I think Councillor Norton said, which I thought was brilliant, was if we get some early wins out of this and that can become a best practice, let's not wait for 5 years because the North End doesn't have, or 3 or whatever the timeline is, doesn't have its neighborhood plan yet to go and implement that best practice somewhere else. So I thought that was brilliant. And again, just I'll circle back to staff. I'll tell you this one guy's perspective. I worked in an organization, I've told you this before, that was one of Canada's 50 best managed companies in the whole country, and I would put our teams up against that team any day. The staff is dedicated. You work day and night. You give great advice. This is another example of committee and staff expertise with some outside help coming together to give this city a really solid visionary document that we can go and implement over the next 30 years. And I'll end with one of the key success factors will be if we can have the corporate discipline to implement it. And I mean elected officials, I mean citizenship, citizens, and all of us. Do we have what it takes to follow this document through? And sorry, I said I would end. There was one line in the document. I was trying to read every page. I didn't get every page. But after the Great Fire, somebody had the guts to stand up and say, we're not rebuilding with wood. We're going to put brick and sandstone on the outside of these buildings. And I was thinking to myself when I read that today, oh my gosh, that must have been controversial at the time. You can imagine, from wood construction to all brick exteriors and sandstone, but look at...
And firewalls, it would have drove the prices way
and firewalls, and look where we are today. So I see us at exactly that same opportunity to really, 30 years from now, to have folks look back and say two things. One, Kay Gillis did an incredible job, and two, if we hadn't had sticky notes that night, where would we be? So, thank you very much.
Okay, that wraps up. Thanks for your input again, and we look forward to going through the adoption process and implementation. So, thank you.
Awesome. Sorry, Phil.
So I will re-adjourn.
Oh, thank you. Yep, second. We have to adjourn. Second. All those in favor?
I think we have to move our receipt file. You want to?
Oh, the one, sorry. Oh, sorry, hold on.
I'll move that motion.
Well, I adjourned the meeting, so I'm not sure how we do that. Remove the recommendation. Second by Councillor McKenzie, sorry, just before. All those in favor? Aye. Any compromise? Okay, thank you. Now adjournment. Thanks.